The stage lights dimmed, the crowd's roar faded to a whisper, and for a moment, the most influential artist in K-pop stood completely alone. This wasn't a concert finale. It was a police station. October 2023, and headlines around the world weren't about G-Dragon's latest fashion collaboration or a record-breaking chart achievement. They were about a mugshot, an investigation into drug use allegations, and the shocking fall of a king. Fans were devastated. Critics were sharpening their knives, and the entire entertainment industry held its breath. This wasn't just a scandal. It felt like the unraveling of a legacy 2 decades in the making. But to understand how we got here, to this moment of very public crisis, you have to rewind past the glamour and the glory to the very first time the industry tried to tear him down. It began not with drugs, but with a different kind of accusation: theft. The year was 2009. G-Dragon was just 21, riding the high of Big Bang's explosive success, and he decided to step out on his own with his first solo album, Heartbreaker. The lead single was an immediate monster hit, topping every chart in Korea. But almost as quickly as it climbed, the whispers started. Online, in music forums, and then in mainstream media, critics and netizens began dissecting the track, comparing it note for note to Flo Rida's 2008 hit, Right Round. The evidence, according to the court of public opinion, was damning. The similarities in the synth melody were undeniable to untrained ears. Then another track, Butterfly, was dragged into the spotlight, accused of borrowing too heavily from Oasis. The plagiarism scandal exploded. This was the pre-social media era where forum posts could make or break a career, and the backlash was vicious. Here was G-Dragon, the so-called genius composer, the poster boy for idol creativity, being painted as a fraud. Music shows debated it. News segments analyzed the musical phrases. For the first time, the narrative around him wasn't about groundbreaking artistry, but about theft. The industry, perhaps uncomfortable with how quickly this young idol was rewriting the rules, seemed ready to watch him stumble. G-Dragon and his agency, YG Entertainment, vehemently denied the allegations, stating the similarities were coincidental and rooted in common pop chord progressions. But the damage was done. The controversy shadowed his first solo win on a music show, turning a moment of triumph into a tense defensive celebration. It was a brutal introduction to a harsh reality. The higher you climb, the more people want to see you fall. The situation only partially resolved when Flo Rida's own camp later clarified there was no legal issue, even expressing interest in a collaboration. But the stain on his early reputation lingered for years, a lesson that in K-pop, your artistic credibility is always under a microscope. The pressure of that microscope only intensified as his fame reached stratospheric levels. By the mid-2010s, G-Dragon wasn't just a musician. He was a global fashion icon, a trendsetter whose every hairstyle sold out in salons across Asia. But with that level of fame came a suffocating lack of privacy and a new, more invasive kind of controversy. The focus shifted from his art to his personal life, and specifically to his relationships. Rumors began to swirl with various celebrities, but one particular connection sent the rumor mill into overdrive. In 2015, Japanese tabloids and then Korean media outlets started publishing heavily blurred photos and vague reports linking him romantically to Kiko Mizuhara, a model and actress. The reports claimed they were dating secretly, meeting in Tokyo and Seoul away from the public eye. What followed was a masterclass in the modern celebrity scandal. Denials from agencies, furious fan theories, obsessive analysis of Instagram posts for hidden clues, and a paparazzi frenzy whenever either was spotted. The controversy wasn't about the relationship itself, but about the intense, often toxic culture of fan ownership. A segment of his fan base, particularly some ardent fans, reacted with a mix of heartbreak and hostility toward Mizuhara. Online forums were flooded with speculation, criticism of her, and debates about whether an idol of his stature should be dating. This wasn't just gossip. It was a window into the immense pressure idols face to maintain a marketable, often solitary persona. The relationship, which was neither confirmed nor denied with absolute clarity for a long time, eventually faded from the headlines, but it highlighted a pivotal issue. G-Dragon was at the forefront of a generation trying to transition from inaccessible idols to respected artists, but the industry's old rules and fan culture's expectations kept pulling him back into the tabloid spotlight. Every personal choice was now a public event, a potential brand crisis waiting to happen. And then the system he operated within began to crack. The real earthquake hit in 2019, and it didn't start with G-Dragon, but it engulfed him completely. The Burning Sun scandal erupted, a terrifying vortex of drugs, sexual assault, police corruption, and organized crime centered around a nightclub in Gangnam. The investigation was like a stone thrown into a murky pond, and the ripples reached the highest echelons of the entertainment industry. As police delved deeper, names started surfacing. Fellow Big Bang member Seungri was indicted on a slew of charges and ultimately sentenced to prison. But the net was cast wide, and soon drug allegations began touching other YG artists. In this tense atmosphere, G-Dragon's name was pulled into the fray. While he was never directly linked to the Burning Sun Club's crimes, the association with the label and the group placed him under a dark cloud of suspicion. Media and public sentiment, already furious and disillusioned by the scandal's revelations, became a blanket of guilt by association. Every past rumor, every eccentric behavior was re-examined under this new, sinister light. The industry's dirty laundry was being aired publicly, and anyone connected to YG, the epicenter of the scandal, was viewed with distrust. This period was less about a specific allegation against G-Dragon and more about the collapse of the entire ecosystem he was a part of. His image, carefully built on avant-garde artistry and rebellious cool, was now tinged with the shadow of his agency's and colleagues' very real, very grim controversies. It was a crisis no PR team could fully manage, because it was about perception on a massive scale. He completed his mandatory military service during this time, returning in late 2019 to an entertainment landscape utterly transformed by scandal, and to a public whose faith in the glamorous facade of K-pop had been profoundly shattered. This brings us to the cliffhanger of 2023, the moment that seemed to confirm everyone's darkest suspicions. Without warning, news broke that G-Dragon was under investigation for alleged drug use. The details were sparse but damning. He was officially booked without detention, his phone seized, his home and person presumably scrutinized. The internet exploded. This wasn't a rumor from a tabloid, this was a formal police investigation. Fans were in disbelief, struggling to reconcile the icon with the mugshot that soon circulated. Critics saw it as the final, inevitable downfall of a star who had flown too close to the sun. Netizens speculated endlessly. Was this a targeted investigation because of his celebrity? Was it a sign of a deeper, hidden struggle? Or was it simply a shocking truth? The analysis went beyond gossip this time. Commentators discussed Korea's incredibly strict drug laws and the cultural stigma attached to drug use, which is seen not just as a crime, but as a profound moral failing. They analyzed the potential impact on his career, on his brand deals worth millions, on his ability to ever perform again in a country with zero tolerance. The industry watched, knowing that the fate of one of its most legendary figures would send a seismic message to everyone else. Then a twist. As quickly as it began, the case started to unravel. G-Dragon's legal team issued strong, proactive statements declaring his innocence and his commitment to cooperate fully. Forensic results came back with no traces of drugs in his system. Key witnesses' statements were called into question. By December, the police officially dropped the case due to lack of evidence, stating they could not substantiate the allegations. He was exonerated, but not unscathed. The damage was deep. The headlines of his innocence didn't travel as far or as loudly as the headlines of his alleged guilt. For many in the international press, the first story was the lasting one. The scandal laid bare the immense psychological toll of his career, the constant pressure, the invasive scrutiny, and the loneliness he'd actually sung about in songs like A Boy and Divina Commedia. It forced a difficult public conversation. Did the very machine he helped build and elevate, the K-pop industry that demands perfection and markets fantasy, also create the conditions for this kind of personal crisis? In the end, the 2023 scandal wasn't just about G-Dragon's possible drug use. It was about the price of being G-Dragon for over 20 years. It was about the cracks that form when you spend a lifetime being watched, analyzed, worshipped, and doubted, all while trying to stay on the cutting edge of an industry that never sleeps. The king survived the latest attempt to dethrone him, but the throne itself, he revealed, can be a very isolating and dangerous place to sit.